I still remember the feeling of the Colorado sun on my face, the dry air crisp against my skin, when I pulled up to what used to be my house. Eleanor, my mother, looked genuinely nervous when she saw my car. But Chloe, my sister? She had this smug, absolutely infuriating smirk plastered across her face, like she'd just won the lottery. "Well, look what the cat dragged in," she sneered, hands on her hips. "Now you're homeless." I just stood there for a beat, letting her words hang in the air, a slow, cold smile spreading across my own face. "What's so funny?" Eleanor snapped, her irritation barely masking a flicker of fear. I simply replied, my voice steady, "The house you think you sold? It wasn't actually mine anymore." To understand that moment, you need to understand a few things. My name's Ethan Reed, and for the last 10 years, my life had pretty much revolved around being the family problem solver. My younger sister, Chloe, is 28. She's perpetually broke, hopping between 6 jobs in 3 years, leasing cars she couldn't afford, and racking up credit card debt buying designer clothes for Instagram. More than once, she crashed on my couch after getting evicted. Meanwhile, I'd spent a decade building a career as a licensed real estate agent in Denver, working my way up from showing cramped studio apartments to closing million-dollar deals. I paid off my student loans at 26, bought my first investment property at 28, and even helped Eleanor and Richard refinance their mortgage when Richard's roofing business hit a slump. Eleanor calls me her rock. Richard says I'm the responsible one. Chloe just calls me boring and tells me I need to loosen up. Honestly, I didn't think much of it. That was just our family dynamic. I fixed things. Chloe created problems. And Eleanor and Richard pretended everything was fine. Last April, something shifted. I finally did something for myself. I booked a week-long vacation to Kauai, my first real break in 7 years. No client calls, no family emergencies. Just me, the ocean, and a paperback thriller I'd been meaning to read. My boss, Dr. Chen, practically forced me to go, saying I was 32, not 62, and needed to take the damn vacation. So I did. I rented a beachfront condo in Poipu, packed light, and made one revolutionary decision: I turned off my phone. Not silent, off. I told my parents I'd check in midweek, told my assistant Maria to handle anything urgent, and for the first time in years, I just existed. I woke up to sunrises, ate fresh poke bowls, went snorkeling, and fell asleep to the sound of waves. It felt like breathing after holding your breath underwater. I remember thinking on day 4, lying on a beach towel with salt drying on my skin, that this was what life should feel like. I wasn't checking emails, wasn't solving anyone's crisis, wasn't the family ATM. I was just Ethan, drinking a cold beer and watching the sunset paint the sky pink and orange. On the last day, I turned my phone back on. It took a full minute to load, and when it did, my stomach dropped. 47 missed calls. 63 text messages. 12 voicemails. Most were from Eleanor, a few from Richard, and surprisingly, 3 from Chloe. My heart started pounding because, in my family, that many messages meant someone died, or the house burned down. I opened the texts first. Eleanor's messages escalated from "call when you can" to "it's urgent to call right now." Chloe's were blunt: "You're gonna be pissed, but whatever, Mom did what she had to do." Richard's voicemails were stiff, uncomfortable, like he was reading from a script, saying, "Eleanor made a decision, and it was complicated." I sat on the condo balcony, still in my swim trunks, and listened to Eleanor's final voicemail. Her voice was shaky, but defiant. She said she knew I'd be upset, but Chloe was in real trouble. Creditors were threatening legal action. Chloe was going to lose everything. They didn't have a choice. They sold my house to pay off her debts. It was done. The closing happened yesterday. She was sorry I had to find out this way, but I wasn't answering, and they couldn't wait. I played it twice, just to make sure. Sold my house to pay off Chloe's debts, my house. The 3-bedroom craftsman bungalow I bought 4 years ago in the Highlands neighborhood. The one I renovated myself on weekends. The one with the garden I planted and the porch where I drank coffee every Sunday morning. They sold it without asking. Without telling me. Until it was already done. I felt cold despite the 80-degree heat. My hands were shaking, not from anger yet, but from sheer disbelief. I called Eleanor back immediately. She answered on the first ring, relief flooding her voice. "Thank God," she said. I was so worried. I interrupted her. "What the hell are you talking about? You sold my house?" She sighed like I was being difficult. She explained that Chloe owed $214,000 from credit cards, personal loans, and that car lease she defaulted on. They were going to sue her, garnish her wages, ruin her credit forever. They had to help. I repeated, louder this time, "You sold my house?" I asked how that was even possible since it wasn't hers to sell. Eleanor hesitated, and I heard Richard murmuring something in the background. Then she explained. I'd given her power of attorney last year when I was stuck in San Francisco for a 3-week closing on a rental property. And technically, the deed had both our names from when she co-signed my original mortgage. My blood went cold. She was right. When I bought the house at 28, I was still building credit, so Eleanor co-signed as a favor. I'd been meaning to refinance and remove her name once my credit improved, but I got busy, and it slipped through the cracks. And yes, I'd given her limited power of attorney for that specific, single transaction on the rental property. I never imagined she'd use it like this. I tried to stay calm. I told her that power of attorney was for one specific transaction and that co-signing didn't give her the right to sell my house without my consent. That was fraud. That was illegal. Eleanor snapped back, her tone shifting from apologetic to defensive, telling me not to be dramatic. They did what they had to do to save my sister. I'd always been the strong one. I'd bounce back. Chloe wouldn't survive this. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I asked if I was supposed to lose my home because Chloe couldn't stop buying $1,000 handbags. Eleanor said, coldly, that it was done. The buyer already moved in. The money was transferred to pay off Chloe's creditors. I could stay with them until I figured things out. They'd make it work. I hung up. I didn't yell, didn't argue further. I just ended the call and sat there, staring at the ocean, my mind racing. They sold my house, my home, the place I'd built my life in. And they acted like I should just accept it, like I was some bottomless well of resources they could dip into whenever Chloe screwed up again. I felt a lot of things in that moment, anger, betrayal, shock. But underneath it all was something colder. Clarity. Because they didn't know something I'd set up 6 months ago after Chloe tried to guilt me into. Co-signing a loan for a business idea that was obviously a scam. I'd gotten smart. I'd protected myself. And the house they sold? It wasn't actually mine. Not legally. Not anymore. I booked the first flight back to Denver. Barely slept on the red-eye and landed at DIA at 6 o'clock in the morning. I didn't go home, to the house that used to be mine. I went straight to a coffee shop near my office, ordered a black coffee, and opened my laptop. I pulled up the documents I needed, the ones I'd filed 6 months ago with my real estate attorney, a sharp woman named Maya Sanchez, who specialized in asset protection. Back in October, after Chloe's loan stunt, I'd gotten paranoid. I loved my family, but I wasn't stupid. So, I did what any smart real estate agent would do. I transferred ownership of my house into an LLC. Willow Peak Holdings LLC, a single-member limited liability company with me as the sole owner and manager. The property deed was no longer in my name, or Eleanor's. It was owned by the LLC, which meant Eleanor's co-signature on the old mortgage was irrelevant. And her power of attorney meant absolutely nothing. She couldn't sell what she didn't legally own. I sat there in that coffee shop, staring at the LLC documents, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Control. They thought they'd backed me into a corner. Thought I'd just roll over and accept being homeless because family comes first. But they were wrong. Dead wrong. I took a long sip of coffee, closed my laptop, and smiled. Not a happy smile. A cold, calculated one. Because I wasn't going to yell, or beg, or guilt-trip them. I was going to do something much worse. I was going to let them think they'd won. And then I was going to show them exactly what happens when you steal from someone who actually knows the law. I drove to the house around noon. My house, or rather, the house they thought they'd sold. It was a sunny Saturday, and as I pulled up to the curb, I saw 3 people standing on the front porch. Eleanor, Chloe, and a middle-aged guy in khakis and a polo shirt holding a folder. The new owner, I assumed. Eleanor looked nervous when she saw my car, but Chloe still had that infuriatingly smug smirk. I parked, got out, and walked up the driveway slowly, keeping my expression neutral. Eleanor stepped forward with her hands clasped. I didn't expect you back so soon. Finding out your family sold your house tends to ruin a vacation, I said. The guy in khakis looked uncomfortable and introduced himself as Kevin Lee. He explained he bought this property 3 days ago. The sale was finalized, and he had the signed deed. He held up the folder like it was a shield. I glanced at it, then back at Eleanor, asking if she'd signed the deed. She said defensively that she had power of attorney and was on the original mortgage, so it was legal. Their lawyer confirmed it. I raised an eyebrow. Did you mean the guy Richard uses for his business contracts? The one who does commercial roofing disputes? Eleanor's face flushed, and she admitted he'd said it was fine. Chloe crossed her arms and leaned against the porch railing. Just stop being so dramatic, Ethan. You'll get another house. You're a real estate agent, for crying out loud. Meanwhile, I was drowning in debt and Mom saved my life. You should show some gratitude. I stared at her for a long moment. I could see Richard's roofing truck parked down the street, meaning he was probably hiding inside the house, too scared to face me. Classic. I asked Chloe, slowly, if she wanted me to be grateful that she racked up $214,000 in debt buying crap she didn't need, and Eleanor decided the solution was to steal my house. Eleanor snapped, "We didn't steal it. We sold it legally to pay off your sister's debts. You would have done the same thing if you weren't so selfish." Kevin Lee cleared his throat. Look, I don't want to get in the middle of a family thing, but I paid $380,000 for this house. The sale is done. I have the deed, the title, everything. I'm sorry if there's confusion, but legally this is my property now. I finally looked at him. I almost felt bad for the guy. Almost. I asked if he'd hired a title company to process this sale. He said, "Of course I did. I'm not an idiot. I used First National Title. They did the full title search, confirmed ownership, everything checked out." "And who did they say owned the property?" I asked. Kevin hesitated, glancing at Eleanor, then explained the deed showed Ethan Reed and Eleanor Reed as co-owners. Eleanor signed on my behalf using power of attorney. It was all verified. I nodded slowly, then pulled out my phone. That deed, I told him, the one showing me and my mother as co-owners? That's 4 years old. It's outdated. 6 months ago, I transferred ownership of this property into a limited liability company called Willow Peak Holdings LLC. The current legal owner of this house isn't me. It isn't my mother. It's the LLC, which means the deed you signed is worthless. The silence that followed was deafening. Kevin's face went pale. What do you mean? Eleanor's voice rose. You can't just transfer ownership without telling anyone. I replied calmly, actually, I could. It's called asset protection. I filed the transfer with the county recorder's office 6 months ago. It's public record. If Mr. Lee's title company had done their job properly, they would have caught it, But they didn't, which means this sale is invalid. Mr. Lee doesn't own this house. Willow Peak Holdings does, and I am the sole member of that LLC. Kevin looked like he might pass out. I paid your mother $380,000. I told him, not unkindly, that he was going to need to get that money back because the person who sold him this house didn't have the legal authority to do so. I suggested he contact his title company immediately and start the process of unwinding the sale. He might also want to talk to a lawyer. Chloe's smug expression had completely disappeared. Does this mean the sale doesn't count? Nope, I said, popping the P for emphasis. It doesn't count. Because you can't sell what you don't own. Eleanor's face turned red. This is ridiculous. Are you going to let your sister lose everything over a technicality? I repeated the word back at her, my voice finally rising. This wasn't a technicality. You committed fraud. You sold property you didn't own using power of attorney you didn't have the right to use. If Mr. Lee wanted to, he could sue you for every penny he gave you, and he'd win. Kevin Lee was already on his phone, frantically dialing, saying he needed to speak to his lawyer now. He walked off toward his car, shouting into his phone about title insurance and legal action. Chloe looked at Eleanor, panic creeping into her voice. What does this mean? If the sale didn't count, do I have to pay the money back? Eleanor didn't answer. She just stared at me like I'd betrayed her. You can't do this. Chloe will be sued. She'll lose everything. I said coldly, she already lost everything. That's why we were in this mess. And now you've dragged an innocent buyer into your scheme, and you've committed fraud. Congratulations. Chloe shouted, this is your fault. If you just helped her in the first place, none of this would have happened. I laughed. Actually laughed. I told Chloe I'd been helping her my entire adult life. I co-signed her first apartment lease. I paid her car insurance when she was unemployed. I lent her $5,000 for that business idea she never paid back. I'd been her safety net for a decade. And this was how she repaid me, by letting Eleanor sell my house. Chloe yelled that they didn't think I'd care this much. It was just a house. I roared back, it was my house. Both of them flinched. I took a breath, forced myself to calm down, and told them what was going to happen. I'm going to contact my attorney, Maya Sanchez. She's going to send you both a cease and desist letter. If you try to contest the LLC transfer, if you try to claim any ownership of this property, I will bury you in legal fees. And Mr. Lee is going to sue you for fraud, and he is going to win because you sold him property you didn't own. So, whatever money you used to pay off Chloe's debts, you better hope you can get it back, because you're going to need it. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. But we're family. I said quietly, family doesn't steal from each other. And you're not sorry you did it. You're sorry you got caught. I turned and walked back to my car. Behind me, I heard Chloe shouting something and Eleanor crying, but I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I got in my car, started the engine, and drove away. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding. But underneath all of it, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Free. I went straight to Maya Sanchez's office. She was in on a Saturday because real estate attorneys in Denver don't really get weekends off. I laid out everything, Eleanor's fraudulent sale, Kevin Lee's invalid deed, Chloe's debts, all of it. Maya listened, made notes, and when I finished, she leaned back in her chair and smiled. She said this was the cleanest case of attempted title fraud she'd ever seen. Eleanor didn't have a leg to stand on. The LLC transfer was rock solid. We'd file a quiet title action to officially confirm Willow Peak Holdings as the rightful owner, send a demand letter to my mother and the buyer, and within 30 days, this whole mess would be resolved. I asked what would happen to the buyer. Maya explained he'd get his money back through title insurance. That's what title insurance was for, situations exactly like this. He'd be made whole, and his insurance company would go after Eleanor to recover the funds. She was the one who was going to be on the hook. I nodded slowly and said, "Good." Maya's tone softened. She asked if I was okay. This is your family, after all. That has to be hard. I thought about it for a moment, then shook my head. I told her I thought it would be, but honestly, I felt lighter than I had in years. Over the next 2 weeks, everything unfolded exactly as Maya predicted. Kevin Lee's title insurance company confirmed the sale was invalid and refunded his $380,000. They then filed a claim against Eleanor to recover the funds, but since she'd already transferred the money to Chloe's creditors, she didn't have it. The insurance company threatened legal action, and Richard had to take out a second mortgage on their house to pay it back. Chloe's creditors, meanwhile, were informed that the payments were being reversed and her debts were reinstated. She was right back where she started, except now she'd burned every bridge with me. Eleanor called me 17 times in those 2 weeks. I didn't answer. Chloe sent texts ranging from apologetic to furious. I blocked her number. Richard finally showed up at my office looking exhausted and ashamed. He said quietly that Eleanor was a wreck and she didn't mean for it to go this way. I said flatly that she meant to steal my house. The only thing she didn't mean was to get caught. Richard asked if we could work this out, saying, "We're family." I looked at him for a long moment, this man who taught me how to throw a baseball and change a tire, and I felt nothing. No anger, no love, just indifference. I told him he stood by and let her do it. He didn't call me, didn't warn me, didn't stop her. He was just as guilty. He left without another word. And that was it. The legal battle was over. The house was officially, irrevocably mine again. And my family? They were strangers now. You'd think that would be the end of it. But with my family, nothing is ever that simple. Over the next month, the calls kept coming. Not from Eleanor or Chloe, they'd finally gotten the message. But from aunts, uncles, cousins, people I barely talked to, suddenly very concerned about family unity. My Aunt Susan called me at work one afternoon, her voice dripping with passive-aggressive sympathy, saying Eleanor was devastated and only wanted to help Chloe. Didn't I think I was being a little harsh? I told her Eleanor committed fraud, and if I'd done that to a client, I'd lose my license and go to jail. Susan insisted that family forgives. I said family also doesn't steal from each other, and hung up. My Uncle Mark tried the guilt trip approach, saying Richard's health wasn't great and all this stress. Did I want that on my conscience? I didn't even respond to that one. The thing is, they didn't actually care about me. They cared about the fact that I wasn't playing my role anymore. The reliable son, the family ATM, the guy who fixed everyone's problems while his own life fell apart. And now that I'd stepped out of that role, they didn't know what to do with me. 8 weeks after I got back from Kauai, Eleanor sent me a letter. Not an email, not a text, an actual handwritten letter delivered to my office. I almost threw it away, but curiosity got the better of me. It was 3 pages long, and she apologized, sort of. She said she never meant to hurt me and only wanted to save Chloe. She hoped we could move past this as a family. And then, in the final paragraph, she got to the real point. She said they were struggling financially because of the legal fees and the second mortgage. Chloe still owed money, and the creditors were threatening her again. I was the only one who could help. If I could just lend them $50,000, they could get back on their feet. She promised they'd pay me back. I read it twice. Then I did something I never thought I'd do. I laughed out loud, alone in my office. I laughed until my stomach hurt, because after everything, after the fraud, the lies, the manipulation, the complete disregard for my life, she was asking me for money again. That's all I'd ever been to them, a resource, a solution, a wallet with a heartbeat. I didn't respond to the letter. I just filed it away with all the other legal documents from this mess. 2 months later, my parents made one last attempt. They invited me to Sunday dinner, and part of me, maybe the stupid, hopeful part, wanted to believe they'd finally realized what they'd done. So, I went. Big mistake. Eleanor was overly cheerful. Richard was stiff and awkward. And Chloe sat at the table with her arms crossed like a teenager forced to attend family therapy. For 20 minutes, it was painfully polite small talk. Then, halfway through the meal, Eleanor cleared her throat and said they'd come up with a plan. Chloe was going to move in with them to save money. And since I had that big house all to myself, maybe I could take out a home equity line of credit to help them cover some expenses. Just temporarily, of course. I said, no, just that. No explanation, no discussion, just no. Richard's voice turned sharp. You owe us. I stood up. I don't owe you anything. I've spent the last decade bailing this family out of every crisis. And the one time I set a boundary, they called me selfish. They sold my house. They committed fraud. They didn't apologize. They asked for more money. So, no, I don't owe them a damn thing. Chloe called me a selfish jerk. I told her she was a leech who'd been sucking this family dry for years. And the second someone said no, she threw a tantrum. Eleanor started crying, asking how I could say that about my sister. I said she was a 30-year-old woman who'd never taken responsibility for her life, and Eleanor had enabled her every step of the way. They wanted to help her? Fine. But leave me out of it. As I walked toward the door, Eleanor followed me. If you walk out, don't come back. I stopped, turned, and said, good. Because I wasn't planning to. I left, got in my car, drove away, and never looked back. And I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel sad. I felt free. It's been 6 months since that dinner. I haven't spoken to Eleanor or Chloe since. I blocked their numbers, unfriended them on social media, and moved on with my life. I heard through the grapevine that Chloe declared bankruptcy and is living with my parents rent-free. Eleanor and Richard are struggling with the second mortgage, but refuse to downsize. They still think I'm the villain in this story. Maybe I am. I don't really care, because I'm happy now. Genuinely, actually happy. I sold one of my investment properties and bought a bigger house in Wash Park, a beautiful craftsman with a view of the mountains. I wake up every morning, make coffee, and sit on my porch watching the sunrise. I don't check my phone for crisis messages. I don't worry about whose problem I'm going to solve today. I just live. I started dating someone, joined a hiking group, and even took a weekend trip to Boulder just because I felt like it. Little things, normal things, things I never had time for when I was busy being everyone's emergency contact. And I don't miss them. My family, I mean. I thought I would. Thought there'd be this gaping hole where they used to be, but there isn't. There's just peace. Last week, I got an email from Eleanor saying Richard had a minor heart attack last month. He was okay now, but it was a scare. She wanted me to know in case something happened. She wasn't asking me to come back, just asking me to think about it. I read it twice, waiting for the guilt to hit, for the old instinct to kick in and make me rush to their side. But it didn't come. I felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just a distant acknowledgement that this was their life, not mine. I didn't respond. Maybe that makes me cold. Maybe it makes me a bad son. I don't know. What I do know is this: I love my family. I don't pay their bills. If that makes me the villain, fine. I've got a life to live. What do you think about this story?